Ascended Aurora's face was scrunched up in pain after having her back smashed against the tree trunk from the force of the explosion. She shouldn't have asked him to give it a try if she knew this was the way he was going to deal with these ants. After the dust settled, all of them decided to leave the safety of the tree trunk and check on the state of their surroundings. Jumped onto the having settled themselves, they broad branch. Except for Aurora, Amber, and Vivian, the rest of them were pale with shock. Although they were quite far from the center of the explosion, they were still slightly injured by the impact. A couple of them felt the beginnings of abnormal circulation and meridian stasis from the blast. It was a good thing that they stocked up on pills for a swift recovery. Soon after, they were certain at what they saw. This guy. How on earth did he manage to withstand such a powerful impact? Zen stood firmly on the branch with no signs of injury at all despite being smacked in the middle of the explosion. Aurora pursed her lips as she looked up at the unharmed young man. She couldn't help but sulk at the fact that the world was so unfair. They were both Soul Sea Realm warriors, but why was there such a huge difference in their strength? Amber, on the other hand, only sighed. She wasn't as surprised as the others. In fact, this was exactly what she expected. He's grown so much in just the span of 7 years. Now I'm the one who has to look up to him, she couldn't help but think to herself as she looked at Zen. With the elimination of these explosive ferocious ants, their way forward had now been cleared. These absolute power back in the lower world, but here Soul Sea Realm warriors were in the lower end of the social warriors had been top warmers and held spectrum. They would have to get used to the status change soon enough. The woman curled up in a corner as she tried to get used to the violent vitality between heaven and earth. At the same time, a heavy descended upon her. Feeling of melancholy. My husband's cultivation was at the life and death realm back then. It's been more than 6 years since he left. I don't know which level he's reached now. Has he already reached the Soul Sea Realm? Couldn't help but wonder to herself. This woman was no other than Cloud Hall's leader, Letitia. She had finally reached the Soul Sea Realm after so many years. When Zen left, she had already been pregnant. Their child had been born as a boy whom she Jeffrey Luo. Named Jeffrey was her only source of consolation for the past 6 years. He was the spitting image of Zen, which somewhat eased her loneliness but also added to her worries every single day. It was normal for warriors to separate for several years after getting marmed. Some even went to the extremes and practiced 100 years in seclusion. Separate them from their partners, but the only time they would get to meet again would be after an entire century. A door would often. However, Zen and Letitia had married young and Letitia herself had no experience in dealing with lovesickness. These past few years of being separated from Zen almost killed her. The only way she could rid herself of this torment was through immersing herself in cultivation, and, after 6 long years, she finally reached the Soul Sea Realm. The 8th branch would normally taken several hours to pass, but that time had now been reduced to 5 minutes because of Zen's strong attack. The group stepped onto the plate at the end of the branch and continued their climb. Meanwhile, in the Humanity Alliance, a petite figure had climbed out of an ascending pool in the Three Purities world. The water had drenched her entire body, but with a gust of cold air, it immediately turned into once shards. The woman shook her body and let the shards fall into the pool. Ding ding. The vitality between heaven and earth here is so violent. She looked around and took in her surroundings with curiosity. Wanting to see more of this strange place she had just arrived in, she slowly walked down from the side of the ascending pool. You, and the rest of you stay there. Don't move. An armored warrior ordered. The woman slightly raised her brows as a brief display of defiance. However, she was quick to submit after finding out the cultivation level of this warrior. He was a powerful master at the late stage of the Soul Sea Realm. She did not resist and obediently followed the other warriors who had also ascended from the lower world. These new rivals had high hopes for the upper world. None of them knew that the competition here was going to be even more grueling than that of the lower world. Her son, Jeffrey, was now 6 years old and an extremely intelligent boy. The Cloud Hall enjoyed a high status in the central region, and he had a much stronger advantage of having Cloud Hall's resources at his disposal. He had already reached the 4th grade of the nature level foundation than his peers due to her ascension meant she had to leave her son, but it was a necessary trade-off in order to reunite with Zen. This supreme world is so vast and boundless that you can't even imagine how big it is. Even the traveling speed of Soul Sea Realm warriors would not be enough. It would still take you around 100 years to cross it. This is the pure jade sacred place of our 3 purities world. It is a 10th grade sacred place. The world lord of the 3 purities world is also the saint lord of our pure jade sacred place. The armored Soul Sea Realm warrior informed them as a kind of briefing. His words immediately shook Letitia's heart. She knew the upper world was vast and boundless and couldn't be compared with the Garret world she was from. She knew the path towards Zen wasn't going to be easy. However, from what the armored warrior said, the size of these 100,000 supreme worlds was beyond her expectation, and it was even harder for her to find Zen than what she initially imagined. 100 years for Soul Sea warriors to travel across a supreme world? It was ridiculous. Not to mention that there were still 100,000 supreme worlds here. Finding her husband was going to be even harder than finding one geohedral in a haystack. And what was the warrior saying? She had ascended to a 10th grade sacred place? Just how strong was this sacred place? These thoughts went through her mind as she there. All the warriors from the lower world, follow me, the armored warrior ordered with a booming voice. Since the opening of the illusion battlefield, the miners have all slipped in one by one. The entire mean one's in a dire need of manpower. You all have to go to the mineral vein of our pure jade sacred place to do the mining. The illusion battlefield had opened and all Soul Sea Realm warriors were allowed to participate. It was generally forbidden for the ascended warriors to participate since they still needed to work in the mineral vein, but it proved to be impossible to stop them. All the Soul Sea warriors needed to do was to step inside and leave the mining work behind, so nobody could really do anything to stop them. What was even more infuriating was that the pure jade sacred place had forbidden all the stewards from entering the illusion battlefield. They could only look on in despair as the chance of improving themselves slipped away from their fingers. Mining? How long will it take? A newly ascended warrior asked. It all depends on your strength. Some people are fortunate and were able to leave after 3 to 5 years. Others, not so much. There are some who've stayed here for over 100 years. The armored warrior at the Soul Sea Realm answered with a laugh. His answer stunned the newly ascended warriors. Ascending to the upper world had been a lifelong dream from them back in the lower world, but now they had just been told that they might have to spend over 100 years here just mining. This was definitely not what they expected. Letitia's heart was also filled with anxiety. She just mechanically followed the group and didn't know what she should do. She had initially been an independent woman but had grown reliant on Zen after their marriage. But he wasn't here right now. He hadn't been for the past few years. Zen's talent was no doubt enough to make him a core martial artist in a 10th grade sacred place. But there were so many supreme worlds here, one inch the upper world, and she had no idea which one he ended up in. Would she really have to mine here for decades? If she had known this earlier, then she wouldn't have ascended. She would have just stayed in the lower world with her jetry. But it was too late for regrets now. The armored warriors quickly led them to a space tunnel and advanced. However, halfway through their journey, an armored warrior went into the group and stopped in front of Letitia. "You, stop. You don't need to mine anymore." "Huh?" she could only remark in surprise. The armored warrior only shook his head. "Just follow me." Her eyes flickered in curiosity, not really knowing what was happening. Everything was just so strange here in the upper world. But she took it as a good sign that she wouldn't need to mine anymore. Letitia split from the group and followed the armored warrior into the space tunnel. They walked through it for a while before finally arriving at a large city. Her eyes were wide in wonder as she took in the grandeur of the sights in front of her. Soon enough, she was being led into an equally exquisite hall. Dozens of women were already gathered here, all of them at the Soul Sea Realm. Letitia took the chance to converse with some of them and found out that they too were all newly ascended warriors from the lower world. They were also brought here with no knowledge as to why and what exactly was waiting for them. Leaving wasn't an option since there were armored warriors who stood guard outside the hall. When Letitia realized this was something initiating on, that there was why exactly had they been brought and gathered here? Nobody knew, so they could only resort to focusing on their cultivation. Letitia and these other women had waited here for half a month until, one day, 3 men armed. Their bodies emitted strong auras and all of them were powerful masters at the Spirit Supreme realm.